So imagine having to plan an elaborate, like, 200-person wedding.
Oh boy. Just the thought of that is exhausting.
Right. You have to book a venue, coordinate the catering, figure out the floral displays, notify people across the country.
And deal with all those incredibly fraught family dynamics.
Exactly. But now imagine you only have 3 days to pull this whole thing off.
3 days. That's practically impossible.
Yeah, and you are expected to spend upwards of $10,000 immediately, out of pocket.
Wow.
And here is the absolute kicker. The guest of honor has just passed away.
Yeah. It is, it's a staggering expectation when you actually break it down like that.
It really is. I mean, that sheer logistical mountain is exactly what we ask grieving families to climb every single day in this country.
We really have. We've sort of normalized a process that requires everyday individuals to become like high-level event planners on the absolute worst, most emotionally devastating day of their entire lives.
The cognitive dissonance of that is just profound.
It completely is.
Well, welcome to a very special deep dive, serving as a feature for the Funeral Channel Network.
Glad to be here for this one.
We are taking a really hard look at a topic that carries immense emotional weight for all of us, but it's one that is currently undergoing a massive, rapid, and honestly incredibly compassionate evolution.
It really is an evolution.
Yeah.
And it's moving fast.
Yeah. And our grounding material for this exploration today is a really comprehensive overview from an educational resource called the Funeral Program site.
Right. They put out some great materials.
They do. We're specifically examining a piece they wrote on a rising trend known as silent cremation or direct cremation.
And, what makes this particular subject so compelling is that it operates right at this intersection of, like, cold logistics and deep human empathy.
Yes, absolutely.
We are basically looking at a fundamental shift in how society handles loss. I mean, it isn't just a change in purchasing habits,
Right, it's not just about spending less.
Exactly. It's a redefinition of what authentic remembrance actually looks like when you finally strip away those rigid, traditional expectations that have, governed end-of-life care for over a century.
And that is exactly our mission for you today. We want you, the listener, to truly understand this rising trend.
Because it affects everyone eventually.
It does. We are going to explore why thousands of families are making the active choice to decouple the logistics of a passing from the emotional process of memorialization.
Which is a huge mental shift.
It is. We are going to look at how this decision impacts finances, how it fundamentally protects a family's mental health in the immediate aftermath of a loss, and what this whole generational shift means for the future of how we grieve.
But, before we get into the granular details, I think we need to establish a really crucial baseline here.
Yeah, please do.
This shift toward direct or silent cremation is absolutely not about society caring less about their loved ones.
That's such an important point to make right off the bat.
It really is. It is not some erosion of respect. It's not a cheapening of life. If anything, it is a highly intentional, very thoughtful pivot toward protecting the integrity of the grieving process itself.
Okay, let's unpack the actual mechanics of this, because the term silent cremation can sound, a bit stark.
Yeah, it can sound a little cold if you're hearing it for the very first time.
Exactly. So let's get into the physical reality of it. When we strip away all the societal assumptions, what exactly does this process entail?
Well, at its core, direct cremation is a completely private form of disposition, and it is defined just as much by what it bypasses as by what it actually is.
Okay, what do you mean by bypasses?
Well, in this model, there is no embalming process. There is no open casket public visitation or, like, a wake.
Right.
There's no formal funeral service held prior to the disposition. And crucially, there are no witnesses present during the actual cremation itself.
Let me stop you right there, because I think the embalming aspect is a huge mental hurdle for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely it is.
For decades, the public has been conditioned to believe that embalming is like a legal requirement, or just the standard thing you automatically do immediately after a death.
Right. People just assume it's mandatory.
But it's fundamentally an invasive preservation technique, right?
Yeah.
Bypassing it entirely just completely changes the immediate timeline.
Exactly. I mean, historically, embalming became popularized in America during the Civil War out of sheer logistical necessity.
Oh, because of the soldiers.
Yeah. Families wanted their sons shipped home on trains across the country, and, preservation was required for that long journey.
That makes sense.
But over time, that wartime logistical necessity kind of morphed into this peacetime cultural expectation.
Wow. So we just kept doing it.
Pretty much. We started linking the physical preservation of the individual to the opportunity for a public viewing. But direct cremation severs that link entirely.
It just acknowledges that if there is no public viewing, there's absolutely no need for invasive preservation.
Exactly. It's just not necessary.
So walk me through the actual flow then. The passing occurs. What happens behind the scenes in those first, say, 24 to 48 hours if a family has chosen the silent route?
Well, the funeral home or the crematory simply transfers the individual directly into their care from the place of passing.
So that could be a hospital or a hospice facility or a private home?
Right, exactly. And from there, the professionals just handle all the legally required documentation.
Which I assume is a lot of paperwork.
Oh, it is. The chain of legal paperwork required to authorize a cremation is really extensive. They secure the permits, they file the death certificate, and then they coordinate the cremation entirely behind the scenes, completely privately.
Okay, I have to ask the skeptical question here, because if I am putting myself in the shoes of a grieving family right now, the idea behind the scenes and, no witnesses might trigger some anxiety.
That is completely understandable.
Right. Like if I am not there, if my family isn't there watching, how do I know the dignity of the person is being maintained? Does private mean careless?
That is the most natural fear a family can have, and it's one that professionals in this space really anticipate.
How do they handle it?
Well, the absence of witnesses absolutely does not equate to an absence of professional care.
Okay.
The operational standards for direct cremation involve incredibly strict chain of custody protocols.
What does that look like in practice?
We are talking about rigorous identification tracking that follows the individual from the moment they leave the place of passing through every single step of the cremation process.
So it's heavily regulated.
Extremely. Respectful handling is a non-negotiable, heavily regulated mandate, even when the room is totally empty of family members.
It's essentially treating the physical reality of death with absolute clinical respect, while allowing the emotional reality to be handled completely separately.
That's a great way to put it.
Which kind of brings us back to that impromptu wedding analogy from the start.
Right, the pressure cooker of it.
Yeah. With a traditional funeral, the physical disposition, like actually putting the casket in the ground, is permanently tethered to the emotional service. They have to happen on the exact same day.
And that tether is exactly what creates the pressure cooker. I mean, for centuries, if you wanted a service, you had to have the body present.
Because refrigeration didn't always exist.
Exactly. And chemical preservation has its limits. So that meant you had this ticking clock. You had a roughly 3 to 5 day window to execute this massive emotional and logistical event.
But silent cremation takes a pair of scissors to that tether.
Yes, it completely severs the link between the disposition and the memorialization.
It basically says, we are going to handle the physical logistics swiftly, cleanly, and privately right now, and we will handle the emotional memorialization later when we can actually, breathe.
It is a radical reclamation of the timeline. You are literally taking the physical event off the immediate calendar.
Well, let's talk about the pressures that force people into needing that timeline reclaimed. Because you really can't understand why people are making this choice without looking at the immediate, just crushing realities families face.
Oh, definitely. The pressure is immense.
And the most glaring, unavoidable one is the financial burden. Traditional funerals are just staggering in their cost.
They really are.
Break down what a family is actually paying for in that 3-day scramble.
Well, the itemized list of a traditional funeral reads like a major corporate event budget.
Yeah.
You are purchasing a casket, which alone can cost several $1,000s.
Just for the box.
Just the box, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you are paying for the chemical embalming process and the professional cosmetic preparation. You are renting a specialized facility for the visitation and the service.
Plus the transportation, right?
Oh, yeah. You are hiring specialized transportation hearses, limousines. Then there are the massive floral arrangements, the cemetery plot itself, the concrete vault required by most cemeteries.
Wait, a concrete vault is required?
By most modern cemeteries, yes, to keep the ground from settling. And then you have the headstone and all the printed materials.
You are watching a cash register ring up $10, $12, maybe $15,000 at a moment when your executive function is just completely shot.
Totally offline.
You are operating on zero sleep, you are drowning in grief, and someone slides a price list across a mahogany desk. It's almost a predatory dynamic, even if the funeral director is genuinely trying to be helpful.
The psychology of making a major financial decision while in an active state of trauma is just a recipe for regret.
I can imagine.
Your brain's amygdala is firing, your prefrontal cortex, the part that handles logic and budgeting, is basically offline. And the traditional model requires you to make permanent, highly expensive choices in that exact state.
Which is why direct cremation acts as such a powerful financial alternative. The focus narrows down to the absolute bare minimum.
Exactly. You are paying strictly for essential professional services.
The transportation, the paperwork, and the cremation itself.
Right. There is no upselling on a velvet-lined casket that is ultimately going to be incinerated or put into the dirt. It is an exercise in absolute financial pragmatism.
The financial gap between the two options is staggering. Direct cremation is often just a fraction of the cost of a traditional burial. We are talking about hundreds or low thousands of dollars versus tens of thousands.
The relief that brings to a family is immeasurable.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because this is where the cultural guilt creeps in.
Oh, the guilt is a huge factor.
I hear the logic in saving the money, right? But let's be real. If I choose the dramatically cheaper option, if I don't buy the fancy casket or host the lavish catered wake, my extended family might whisper that I'm cheap.
Yes, the judgment of relatives.
Does choosing financial simplicity cause families to feel guilty? Does it feel like they are somehow, I don't know, cheapening the life of the person they just lost?
It's a massive psychological hurdle.
Right.
And frankly, it is a vulnerability that the funeral industry historically leaned on quite heavily.
Yeah, how so?
It's this unspoken equation that money spent equals love demonstrated.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, if you really loved your father, you wouldn't put him in a basic container, right? You'd buy the solid bronze.
That is so manipulative.
It is. But what is so refreshing about the current shift we are seeing is how actively that misconception is being dismantled.
Because logic goes completely out the window when you're grieving. You just want to prove to the world how much this person meant to you.
Exactly. But families are waking up to the reality that draining a savings account or putting $10,000 on a high-interest credit card does not make you a more devoted child or a better spouse.
It just makes you a grieving person who is now in debt.
Right. The integrity of a life is not measured by the retail value of the vessel holding the remains.
I think that's a incredibly liberating realization. And financial stress is rarely just about the money anyway. It compounds everything else.
Oh, it absolutely multiplies the stress.
If you are terrified about how you are going to pay for the funeral, you aren't actually present for the funeral.
Financial panic entirely halts the grieving process. You cannot process emotional loss if you are simultaneously terrified about your financial survival.
It's just Maslow's hierarchy of needs right there.
Exactly. When silent cremation removes that massive financial terror from the equation, it is literally clearing a neurological path for the family to begin mourning in a healthy way.
And that brings us to the emotional toll, which is perhaps the most compelling argument for this whole shift.
I agree.
Think about what a family is juggling in those first 48 hours. They are fielding hundreds of text messages, trying to figure out which aunt is speaking to which cousin.
The family politics alone are exhausting.
Oh, absolutely. They're hunting down life insurance policies, trying to write an obituary, and trying to plan a massive event. It is a literal pressure cooker.
It is the absolute definition of cognitive overload.
Mm.
By bypassing the embalming, the viewing, and the formal ceremonies before the cremation, silent cremation functions as a massive pressure release valve.
It just lets the steam out.
Right. You are fundamentally reducing the immediate emotional stress. You are crossing event planning off the list entirely.
Let's talk about a specific group of people who benefit from this pressure release, because this is a reality that honestly doesn't get enough attention.
Who are you thinking of?
Think about caregivers.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Think about a spouse who has spent the last 2 years caring for a partner with terminal cancer, or a daughter who has moved in to provide round-the-clock hospice care for an aging parent.
The biological exhaustion in those scenarios is profound. When you are a long-term caregiver, you are running on a constant drip of adrenaline and cortisol.
Just survival mode.
Yes.
Yes.
You are managing medication schedules at 3:00 a.m. You are navigating hospital bureaucracy. You are watching someone you love slowly decline. It takes a massive physical toll.
And then the passing finally occurs. The adrenaline crashes. Your body literally just gives out.
You hit the wall.
And the traditional societal template taps that exhausted caregiver on the shoulder and says, okay, now you need to put on a suit, stand in a receiving line for 4 hours, and host 200 people.
It borders on cruel.
It really does.
Asking a biologically depleted human being to suddenly pivot from a hospice nurse to a public host is just an unreasonable demand.
So how does silent cremation help them specifically?
Well, silent cremation provides what is essentially a gentler transition period. It respects the caregiver's physical and emotional limits by completely removing the urgency of immediate ceremony preparation.
You know, if you are an exhausted caregiver listening to this right now, or if you are simply anticipating a loss and feeling paralyzed by the thought of what comes next, you need to hear this.
Yes, please listen to this.
Choosing a simpler path, choosing to just pause the clock, is not a failure of duty. It is a deeply compassionate, incredibly valid choice for your own mental health.
Absolutely.
Giving yourself permission to step off the public stage and just breathe is one of the kindest things you can do in the face of tragedy.
It is entirely about giving yourself permission. Because we have to acknowledge that traditional funerals contain a heavy performative element.
What do you mean by performative?
Well, you are expected to receive guests, right? To manage the optics of the event, and ironically, to comfort the people who came to comfort you.
Oh, I've seen that so many times. The widow ends up comforting everyone else.
Exactly. For many people, avoiding the emotional intensity of an open casket or a rigid public ritual is the only way their genuine mourning can actually unfold.
And this performative aspect, it doesn't fit everyone anyway. What if the person who died was an extreme introvert?
That's a great point.
Right. There are people who specifically outline in their final wishes. No service, no witnesses. They valued their privacy fiercely while they were alive.
So why change that now?
Exactly. Why would they suddenly want to be the center of attention, lying in a room while hundreds of people stare at them in death?
Maintaining that continuity of character is beautiful. If you cherish privacy in life, it makes perfect sense to demand privacy in death.
It really does.
And this push for authenticity, this rejection of the one-size-fits-all societal template in favor of what actually reflects the individual is the driving force behind a massive generational shift we're seeing.
Let's dive into that generational shift right now, because we are seeing millennials, Gen Z, and even younger Gen X completely rewrite the rules here.
They really are throwing the old playbook out.
They are looking at the traditional Victorian-era funeral model and saying, yeah, no thank you. They're prioritizing personalization, flexibility, and absolute practicality.
The word flexibility is the linchpin there. And we have to ask why.
Okay, why?
Why is flexibility suddenly the ultimate priority for these younger generations when it comes to end-of-life decisions? Why does compressing grief into a single, highly structured, immediate event no longer make sense to them?
I think the biggest catalyst for that is geography.
Yes, the map has changed.
Look at how the modern family is structured compared to 50 years ago. We don't live in the same village our whole lives anymore.
Hardly anyone does.
A family unit today might look like this. The parents retired to Florida, one kid lives in New York, another kid is working in London, and the cousins are scattered all across the West Coast.
The geographic footprint of the average family has just exploded.
So imagine trying to organize an immediate service within a 3-day window for that family.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
It is an absolute logistical nightmare. You are forcing people to buy last-minute, exorbitant international airfare. You are forcing them to beg for emergency time off work. You are scrambling for childcare.
You're just piling stress on top of grief.
You are injecting pure chaos into an already chaotic, traumatic moment.
And it practically guarantees that key people won't be able to attend, which just adds a layer of guilt and resentment to the grief.
Like, oh, John couldn't make it from London. He must not have cared.
Exactly. But silent cremation changes the game entirely. Because the physical disposition is handled privately right away, the memorial gathering is no longer tied to the immediate timeline.
So you can plan it for later.
Yes. The gathering can occur a month later, it can happen 6 months later, it can happen over the summer when everyone actually has the time and ability to travel.
This is where we hit upon a really fascinating parallel. Think about how we structure modern life today. We live asynchronously.
Asynchronously, right.
We work across time zones on shared documents. We communicate via texts and voice notes that we answer when we have the mental bandwidth. We stream television on demand rather than sitting down at 8:00 p.m. on a Thursday to watch a broadcast.
That's very true.
Our entire existence is built around flexibility and asynchronous engagement.
And yet, until very recently, We demanded that grief be the one thing that remained perfectly synchronous.
We really.
We demanded that everyone drop everything, fly to one location, and feel their feelings loudly, simultaneously, between the hours of 2:00 p.m. and 4:00 p.m. on a Tuesday.
It's absurd when you frame it like that. Silent cremation is simply society allowing end-of-life rituals to catch up with how we actually live.
Catching up with the reality.
It is asynchronous grief. We are removing the arbitrary deadline and letting the gathering happen when the people involved are actually ready, logistically and emotionally, to show up and be present.
It is a profound modernization of mourning. And, this shift away from rigid tradition intersects seamlessly with another major defining value of younger generations.
It is.
Modern minimalism and a deep awareness of environmental impact.
Oh, this is a huge factor.
It really is.
For families who are actively seeking simpler practices in their daily lives, the bloated, highly material nature of a traditional funeral feels incredibly jarring. Direct cremation aligns perfectly with personal values surrounding reduced consumption.
If you look at the traditional American funeral through the lens of material consumption, the numbers are just staggering.
Give us an idea of the scale.
Well, we are burying millions of gallons of toxic, embalming fluid like formaldehyde and methanol directly into the earth every single year.
Millions of gallons. Wow.
Yes. We are manufacturing elaborate caskets out of rare hardwoods and metals. We are burying tons of steel and concrete for those burial vaults we talked about earlier.
Just to keep the lawn flat.
Exactly. It is an incredibly resource-heavy enterprise just to maintain a patch of grass.
Let's pose a thought experiment for the listener right now.
Okay, let's hear.
Imagine you're someone who has spent the last 15 years really trying to live consciously. You read Marie Kondo, you decluttered your home, you strive for a zero-waste lifestyle, you drive an electric car, you compost.
Someone who really cares about their footprint.
Right, you've spent your life trying to tread lightly on the earth. If that is your core identity, wouldn't a highly material, resource-intensive, chemically-laden traditional funeral feel like a complete betrayal of your principles right at the finish line?
It creates immense cognitive dissonance. The way we handle our physical remains is increasingly viewed as our final statement on Earth.
Our last act.
Yes, exactly. Environmental considerations heavily influence the choice for direct cremation because it allows that final act to be one of profound simplicity. It is an intentional rejection of a bloated societal template in favor of personal environmental authenticity.
But I need to make a really crucial pivot here, because there is a massive misconception that we need to clear up based on the article from the funeral program site.
Oh, definitely. We don't want to leave people with the wrong idea.
When people hear minimalist disposition or no formal service, they immediately assume the person is just being swept under the rug.
They assume it's just erasing them.
Right. They assume that skipping the funeral means skipping the grief.
That is the greatest fallacy of the traditional funeral industry. It's this idea that if you don't use their specific building and their specific timeline, you are somehow forgetting the deceased.
But the reality is exactly the opposite. The absence of a formal, immediate service does absolutely not mean the absence of love or grief or remembrance.
If anything, removing the pressure of the immediate funeral clears the slate so that families can reimagine remembrance on their own terms.
That makes so much sense.
When you aren't constrained by a funeral parlor's schedule or their prepackaged service options, you can actively honor a life story in incredibly rich, highly customized ways.
We are seeing an explosion of creativity in how people mourn. Families are designing personal rituals that actually mean something to them.
Like what kind of rituals?
Well, instead of sitting in a dark chapel, they are reserving the back room at the deceased's favorite local pub and sharing stories over their favorite beer.
I love that.
Or they are producing beautifully edited, hour-long documentary tribute videos that can be shared online with friends and family across the globe who couldn't travel.
The memorialization becomes an active, ongoing process rather than a static event. Families are gathering on the one-year anniversary of the passing to hold intimate candle lightings.
Oh, that's beautiful.
They are organizing ash-scattering ceremonies in places that actually held geographic or emotional significance to the person, like a favorite hiking trail in the mountains, a specific beach they grew up on, or even just a beloved garden.
The psychology of place is so important there. Why visit a manicured lawn in a cemetery that the person never set foot in during their life when you can visit the specific forest where they taught you how to camp?
Exactly. It makes the connection so much more real. And the tributes go far beyond just gatherings. We are seeing families create custom keepsake jewelry incorporating the ashes.
Oh, wow, like rings and necklaces.
Yes, exactly. They're planting memory gardens, dedicating park benches, and building elaborate online tribute pages that act as living, breathing archives of a person's life, complete with voice notes, videos, and thousands of photos.
And there's an entire ecosystem of resources out there designed to support this modern, decoupled approach to remembrance. You can still have beautiful, tangible
You
items.
don't have to give up the physical
Okay.
mementos.
Right. You can utilize educational resources and tribute providers, like the ones at the funeral program site, to design incredible memorial stationery, personalized programs, and keepsake urns.
But you're doing it on your own terms.
Yes, you are utilizing them on your own timeline in a way that reflects individual wishes rather than just buying the platinum package from a local parlor. You become the curator of the tribute.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this entire movement. The core realization driving the rise of silent cremation is this. There is no universal formula for grief.
I think everyone needs to write that down. There's no universal formula.
Every family dynamic is different, every culture approaches loss uniquely, and every individual processes trauma at their own pace. Meaningful remembrance does not require a formal public ceremony to validate its existence.
It is about taking back the timeline. When you choose silent cremation, you aren't avoiding a funeral, you know. You are simply opting out of the rush.
You are buying yourself time.
You are actively choosing a path that respects your current financial reality. You are honoring the sheer biological exhaustion of the caregivers involved. You are aligning the final disposition with environmental and minimalist values.
And you are gracefully accommodating the fact that your modern family might be scattered across 3 different continents.
Exactly. By understanding that these options exist, and by talking about them openly, we can collectively work to remove the stigma that still occasionally lingers around choosing simplicity.
It really validates the reality that quiet, private grief is just as profound and often much more authentic for the individuals involved than a highly visible public display of mourning.
Whether you are currently in the incredibly tough position of being overwhelmed by immediate end-of-life planning, or you are healthy and just looking ahead to the future for yourself or your aging parents, or you are simply trying to be a deeply supportive friend to someone who is currently navigating a loss, knowing that this flexible option exists is incredibly empowering.
It really is an empowering tool to have.
It is a permission slip to look at societal expectations and say, no, we are going to do this our way.
Every respectful, thoughtful choice deserves compassion and understanding. Ultimately, the sincerity of the remembrance is what matters, not the size of the crowd, the speed of the gathering, or the retail cost of the casket.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over. We have spent this time discussing how the rigid, traditional template is no longer required to validate the importance of a life.
The script has been thrown out entirely.
So think about your own legacy. If the arbitrary rules are gone, and the timeline, the location, and the manner of gathering are left entirely up to the imagination of the people who love you most, how might you want your own story to be told?
That is a deeply beautiful question to consider, and one that hopefully sparks some important conversations for our listeners.
Thank you so much for joining us, for being curious, and for continually questioning the traditions around you. Take care of yourselves, give yourselves grace, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.